Sometimes, despite all your efforts, people leave, while others make the effort to stay. This is a true story of a man drowning in sorrow who chose to trust a stranger, a woman and a child desperate for shelter, and opened his doors for them. What began as a simple act of kindness unlocked a future that left him speechless. Listen to today's story until the very end to discover who was saved and who needed it more. Please also let us know where you're listening from. Daniel Carter was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. Once the pride of Willow Creek, Iowa, Daniel had lost the spark that made him legendary with a tractor. Tall, strong, and skilled, every piece of machinery bent to his will. But now his house stood quiet and dusty, his shelves coated in years of neglect, and his evenings ended not with conversation, but with a bottle of vodka and silence. The photo of him and Lena, his ex-wife, still sat on the mantel. She had once been his entire world. Lena could light up a room, and Daniel had truly believed they would grow old together in that house. But she left one morning without warning, taking all the money he had worked so hard to save, leaving behind only a hastily scribbled note that offered no real explanation. Her absence echoed through the empty halls and across the cold dinner table. Since then, Daniel had merely existed, moving through each day like a ghost in his own life. The weight of betrayal grew heavier with each passing season. That winter morning was colder than most. Daniel pulled on his jacket and trudged across the icy yard to his old tractor. But he stopped in his tracks when he saw them. A woman in a thin coat holding the hand of a little boy standing at his gate. Her lips were blue from cold and her voice cracked. "Please, we need a place to stay. Just one night." Daniel hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and handed her the key. "The house is warm. There's some food. I'll be back tonight. Just don't break anything." He turned and walked toward the barn, trying to shake the feeling that something in his life had just shifted. The workday dragged on, but Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the woman and child. On his way home, he stopped by the local store. His usual purchase, a bottle of vodka, was joined by a bag of candy. He didn't even know why. When he reached his home, he stopped in shock. The windows glowed warmly inside. The once dead house had come alive. Books scattered on the floor were back on the shelves. The table was set. A pot simmered on the stove. And in the old rocking chair sat the woman, wrapped in a blanket, with a little boy curled next to her, reading a book. "I hope you don't mind," she said as Daniel stepped inside. "We cleaned up a bit and made dinner." He didn't mind at all. The woman introduced herself as Rachel Evans, and the boy was Eli, 6 years old, shy and wide-eyed. Daniel handed him the candy. Eli looked to his mother for permission before accepting. When he finally smiled, something inside Daniel stirred. That night after Eli had fallen asleep, Rachel shared her story. She had once been a college student in Des Moines, full of dreams, but a man she trusted betrayed her, left her pregnant, and vanished. She returned home only to find new trouble. Her mother's new boyfriend, Rick, had turned his attention to her. When she stood up to him, her mother, Carol, didn't believe her. "I ruined her happiness," she whispered, eyes cast down. "I should leave," Rachel said, "but I wanted to keep Eli." Daniel listened silently but felt furious. Every detail Rachel shared twisted something in his chest. The betrayal by her mother, the cruelty of Rick, the fear she carried. Even now he had known loneliness, but this was something deeper, something that called for more than sympathy. It demanded action. In that quiet, fire-lit room, Daniel made a silent vow so strong it felt etched into his bones. No one would hurt them again. Not under his roof, not on his watch. He would protect them, not just out of kindness, but because it felt like the right thing to do. In the days that followed, Rachel brought life back into the home. She scrubbed floors, folded laundry, and always had something warm cooking. Eli followed Daniel like a puppy, helping him feed the hens or pretending to drive the tractor. Daniel found himself looking forward to coming home. Evenings were now filled with laughter, stories, and the soft sound of Eli's feet racing across the wooden floors. The bottle of vodka remained untouched. Of course, in small towns, nothing goes unnoticed. Nancy Green, a neighbor known for her sharp tongue, cornered Daniel one afternoon. "You've been smiling more. Got yourself a woman, huh?" He laughed it off, but unease settled in his chest. The last thing Rachel needed was gossip, or worse, someone recognizing her. That night, she met him at the door, pale and shaking. "A man was here," she said, "looking for a woman with a child. I think it was not Rick." A few days later, Daniel returned home to find a black sedan parked at his gate. Carol and Rick stood on his porch. "I'm here for my grandson," Carol said flatly. "He belongs with me." Daniel squared his shoulders. "This is my house, and they're not going anywhere." Rachel stepped outside, Eli hiding behind her, clutching her skirt. "You don't have that right," Rachel said. Carol sneered. "You have no job, no home." Eli, trembling, said loudly, "I want to stay with Mom and him." That was the end. Carol turned and left, but not before warning, "You'll regret this." Daniel knew threats like hers carried weight. The next morning, he drove to Des Moines and met with a lawyer. The solution: legal guardianship. It wasn't just a legal term, it was a lifeline, a shield, a declaration of intent. For Daniel, it meant fully stepping into the role he had been slowly growing into since Rachel and Eli entered his life. It meant putting his name on paper, not just as a caretaker, but as a protector and a father figure. The process wouldn't be easy, but Daniel didn't hesitate. The lawyer explained that guardianship would give Rachel and Eli immediate protection and prevent Carol and Rick from claiming any legal rights over the boy. He left the law office not just with a plan, but with a renewed sense of clarity. This wasn't charity anymore. It was responsibility. Back home, he sat Rachel down at the kitchen table. Gently, he reached across and said, "We'll make it official. They won't be able to touch you or Eli. I spoke with a lawyer. We can apply for temporary guardianship. It's the safest option right now," he added. Rachel blinked, her eyes filling with tears. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why would you do all this for us? We barely know you. You don't owe us anything." He looked at her softly, his voice low and steady. "Because you made this house a home again. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning, both you and Eli. You brought warmth back into my life. Before you came, this place was just walls and wood. Now, it's alive. You reminded me what it feels like to be needed. I don't want to go back to the way things were." Weeks passed, each one bringing a stronger sense of routine and belonging. The paperwork was finally approved, and with each passing day, Eli grew more attached to Daniel. At first, the word "dad" slipped out hesitantly, barely audible, but Daniel never corrected him. Eventually, Eli said it with confidence, pride swelling in his voice. Their bond had grown into something authentic and lasting. Then came a quiet Sunday morning in early spring, under a handmade arch of pine boughs and winter berries, surrounded by a few kind neighbors. Rachel and Daniel exchanged vows in the front yard of that very house that had once symbolized Daniel's solitude. Eli wore a little bow tie, beaming with joy, clutching both their hands as they said, "I do." The house that had once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, warmth, and the comforting clutter of a family fully formed. Every room breathed new life, toys under tables, a pie cooling on the counter. Carol never returned. Daniel no longer stared at the photo of Lena. It had long since been taken down. Now his walls held drawings by Eli, Rachel's stitched quilts, and memories of a life reclaimed. He had opened his door to a stranger, a woman with tired eyes and a little boy who barely spoke. It could have ended with a meal and a warm night, but instead it became something much deeper. That single act of kindness unlocked something in Daniel, a man who had once resigned himself to loneliness and regret. Over time, those strangers became the heartbeat of his home. The laughter of a child echoed through once silent halls, and the presence of a loving woman filled rooms that had stood cold for years. In doing so, he hadn't just found a family, he had rediscovered his purpose, and with it, a life worth living again. If a stranger showed up at your door with nothing but fear in their eyes and a child by their side, would you let them in? Please share your honest opinions and thoughts. Thank you for listening to Seeds of Rose.